Hey everybody, we're here at Red Rocks Racing Sportsbook. He's Jason, I'm Chucky for the sports betting podcast Bookends. And Jay, we finished a crazy week in the books for both college and pro. I know we have the World Series going on. It's hockey, basketball, Breeders' Cup. But let's start with college football right now. I mean, there is a huge game in Georgia this Saturday when Tennessee travels to Georgia. The bettors love the Tennessee Volunteers right now. 75% of the tickets are on Tennessee, and in Tennessee's last 8 games, they are 7-1 against the number. You've got the highest scoring offense in college football against the second stingiest defense in college football, the Georgia Bulldogs. We saw Georgia last year, how much pride they took in defense and not letting teams get into the end zone. Hooker's going to have his hands full against that D, but this offense is fun to watch for Tennessee.
Yeah, an absolutely incredible matchup as we see here. We actually opened Georgia a 12.5-point favorite in our kind of early look-ahead line, all the way down to 8 as we refresh the new week after the way Tennessee and Georgia looked in their respective games. You talked about it. The new college football rankings are out. Tennessee kind of a surprise at that number 1 spot. Georgia sitting at the number 3 spot. Tennessee traveling on the road between the hedges in Georgia this week. Really looks like a must-win game for Georgia from a college football playoff standpoint. Georgia's remaining schedule, if they were to lose this game, both these teams sit on the same side of the SEC East, which will eliminate one of these teams from going and playing in the SEC championship. Again, another big game with Alabama, LSU that we'll talk about on the other side of that. But it kind of seems like a must-win for Georgia here, as a Tennessee loss wouldn't kind of preclude them because of their big win over Alabama, but kind of a must-win for Georgia in this situation. You talked about it. Not only Vols number 1 in total scoring offense, but number 1 total yardage. Georgia number 2 yardage offense and number 6 in the country at scoring offense. But the big difference you talked about is on the defensive side of things, where Georgia sits as the number 2 scoring offense, only allowing 10.5 points per game, and number 4 in total yards allowed at 262. Volunteers are 26th in defense, allowing 21 points a game, and 82nd in 393 yards a game. So if Georgia's going to do it, they're going to have to do it with that Vaught defense, studying down now Hendon Hooker, who is our Heisman Trophy favorite, moved to the Heisman Trophy favorite, and Hyatt, his receiver's been absolutely fantastic. Hooker with 21 touchdowns on the year and only 1 interception.
Well, we saw kind of Tennessee a few weeks ago when they played Alabama. I mean, they jumped on Alabama's defense from the get. I mean, they just looked like they were clicking on all cylinders. They were in charge of that game offensively. And it's not like Alabama comes into that game with a bad defense either. And they really were able to take advantage of some mismatches. Really, Hooker was able to open some stuff up downfield. Kind of anxious to see how he does against this Georgia defense. Usually in big games, you always kind of favor a big D, but this Volunteer offense is just dynamic.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of confidence on the Georgia side of the football. I think there's all kinds of bulletin board material. Obviously, you've got the number 1 team coming into your house, trying to take that away from you. Georgia did beat this team 41-17 last year. Bennett didn't have particularly a good game. They were able to shut down Hooker with that defense. So I think that the storyline is there for Georgia to play well and potentially cover this number, but they're going to have to stop that dynamic offense that the Volunteers are bringing in.
As Jay mentioned, this is clearly the marquee game of the week, but it really does set up what ultimately is going to happen, I think, later in the season as the committee has some tough decisions to make if Georgia were to lose this game.
Oh, this is, the playoff implications coming out of this game and what's going to happen in the SEC. And when we talk about, the Big Ten, we know we're going to get a representative, whether it's Ohio State or Michigan. They play each other this year. Clemson is really a wild card sitting in that current 4-hole. Have to play Notre Dame, have to potentially play North Carolina in an ACC championship. And then TCU sitting at 8-0, just on the outskirts. If they're somehow able to run the table, now they do have very tough games remaining with at Texas and at Baylor, so we'll see what they can do there.
But if they can run it, I think that just adds to their resume, if that's the case.
What makes this game so interesting is that this is going to decide most likely who's the representative on the SEC East side of going to an SEC championship game, and then you've got LSU, Ole Miss, and Alabama in the mix to represent that SEC West side of things. And obviously, when those teams meet, in order to get 3 teams from the SEC, if the things work out right, to get Tennessee, Georgia, and Alabama all into the playoff, we're going to have to see somebody knock Clemson out, knock TCU out, and probably something happen in the Pac-12 when somebody beats somebody up there.
I wouldn't rule it out, though. I could see that that's going to be a difficult decision to make, and just depending on how it all unfolds, that maybe you actually get 3 teams from the SEC.
But I really believe that this is a bigger game for Georgia as we see it, because a Georgia loss here, I don't see a path for them to get back into the national championship picture. if Tennessee loses here and then whatever happens in an SEC championship game, you can still see Tennessee's argument that we lost on the road at Georgia and we beat Alabama. So
if it's a close game, if they get blown out 45-3, I think that changes the narrative a little bit. But I think if they keep it close, I think that's something the committee will definitely be thinking about.
Well, you talked about a lot of money coming in on Tennessee plus the points, a lot of money coming in on Tennessee on the money line.
I think over the last couple of years, there's not a whole lot of Saturdays that we went into the day needing the Georgia Bulldogs, but it looks like that's going to be the case on Saturday. A couple of other big games, Alabama and LSU. The last 6 times that these two schools have met, 5 of these times the game has gone under with the game being played at LSU. 67% of the tickets are on Alabama, but strange enough, even with that trend, you have 85% of the tickets are over in this game. So bettors love some scoring between Bama and Lucy on Saturday.
Yeah, and it matches up when you've got quarterbacks like Jalen Daniels and Bryce Young. And Bryce Young's somewhat fallen out to the kind of a mid-tier back end of that Heisman Trophy, with Stroud and Hooker kind of being, taking the lead there. So he's fallen out. But a big opportunity here to go into the Bayou, put up some big numbers. And again, this is a must-win game for Alabama.
Right.
Any slip-ups by Alabama potentially eliminates them from the national championship picture. They've got LSU this week. They've got to play Ole Miss next week. So a tough road for Alabama. But again, every game for them is a much win. And we've seen LSU just continue to get better and better each week, kind of after that blowout loss at Tennessee.
So another game we're going to look at now is Baylor and Oklahoma. Oklahoma's a small favorite in this game. Baylor is 5-1 against the spread the last 6 times they've played Oklahoma, and that's probably a reason why we're seeing about 60% of the tickets on the Bears getting points here.
Yeah, and again, the Oklahoma really struggled at the beginning of the year. Then we saw Dylan Gabriel go out, and they've kind of had to revamp themselves to get better. A much-needed win against Iowa State this past week. Baylor continues going to have monster implications here as they've still got a game left here. They've still got a game against TCU. So these are big wins, and when you're looking from a TCU standpoint, they're looking for Baylor to continue to try and win in this situation so that Baylor can vault them from that standpoint.
Right, the resume looks better.
Elevating TCU's resume.
Last game we'll look at is Clemson and Notre Dame. Notre Dame loves playing at home. They're in the role of a dog here. Notre Dame is 20-5 straight up their last 25 games at home. They're getting points here, but 80% of the tickets are on Clemson on Saturday.
Yeah, and the money's continued to go towards Clemson. This game opened up 3.5. It's gone as high as 4.5 with Clemson. Obviously, they've got a path sitting in the number 4 spot in the college football playoff. Easy wins after this game. They've got a bunch of home games, I think, against Louisville, South Carolina.
This is the kind of game, though, that can kind of save maybe Notre Dame's season a little bit. You get a win here, and it changes a lot of things. You beat a team that's
suffering the losses that they did to Marshall and Stanford at home. For them to be able to have a marquee win against a ranked team, this can salvage the season and bring them back. And it's not that Clemson has been monster dominant. I mean, we've seen DJ Ukulele had to get removed from the game last week. Just last week, they were down 21-0 to Syracuse. Came back to win that game 27-21 on Kate Klubnik coming in to fill in. So they're sticking with DJ in there. And so if he struggles again, we potentially see Kate Klubnik come in again. But Clemson hasn't been that dominant team. They've had to eke those wins out. So Notre Dame, and again, we see a short spread here, Clemson only being a 4-point favorite. This is a winnable game for Notre Dame, but this is also a statement game for Clemson. A win here really vaults them and keeps them in those national championship pictures. They've still got some tough games. I think they play Louisville, South Carolina, at home, but their big one's going to be in the ACC championship game, most likely against North Carolina. But to win a national championship and stay in this playoff race, Clemson has to get a win here.
Yeah, I agree. I think if you're Notre Dame, though, this has to be like our playoff game, our big bowl game. We can play the role of a spoiler, potentially knocking a team off that will be in the college football playoff. Yeah,
and this game was moved to 4:30 Pacific start time, so it's going to be highlighted as an evening game, and I'm sure that Notre Dame Stadium will. Maybe they'll be registering on the seismograph as well.
We shall see. Before we end the college football segment, just want to update everybody on last man standing. Total entries before the season started again was 2,908. After last week, or heading into last week, there was 30 contestants left. Now there are 14. So we cut it by 50%. Congratulations, you 14 that are still left right now in the college football last man standing. $100,000 guaranteed aggregate payout. But that's phenomenal as the college football schedule starts to dwindle a little bit.
Yeah, and I think that Penn State did their job. They
Right.
kind of got a late backdoor cover against Ohio State last week.
That was a crazy game, though, because they were in the whole game. Then they weren't covering. Then they needed the back door, as you mentioned, to get the cover.
They got the interception. Ohio State gets a late
Yeah,
interception
sportsbooks.
return,
Right.
pick six that looks like they're covering. Penn State's able to go down and get the backdoor cover. So again, back and forth there, and again some fun college matchups, and I think that's why you saw some of those guests get knocked out.
So 14 of you guys left. Good luck. Again, we knocked out over 50% last week. We'll see what's left as we head into next week. Well, that concludes our college football segment of Bookends. We'll be back for our pro football segment on the Sports Betting Podcast, Bookends.
Hey there, my name's Stephen Money, and here's why you should bet on me, the STN Sports App. These are my best buds here at Station Casinos, like my friend Jimmy here, and he'll help you get on me. Wait, that sounded weird.
Cut.
It only takes a few minutes to sign up. Just park at any of our 14 convenient sign-up locations, walk in, and you'll be signed up in minutes. And don't worry, I got all your favorite sports covered, and a lot of betting options. So what are you waiting for? Download the STN Sports app today and trust the local favorite.
Hey everybody, we're back at the beautiful Racing Sportsbook here at Red Rock Resort and Casino. Jason, I'm Chucky. We're going to dive right into pro football. Thursday night football. The only undefeated team left, the Philadelphia Eagles, who are kind of taking a back seat, as we talked about, to the Philadelphia Phillies right now, the Houston Texans, who are dead last in stopping the run. And that four-headed monster of Philly might be able to run all over this team. 4 of the last 5 times these two teams have played, Jay, the total has gone over. 67% of the tickets are on the Eagles in this one. And you have to love the way that Jalen Hurts, those 3 touchdown passes to A.J. Brown on Sunday, those were on a dime. Those were great passes. So this offense really seems to be kind of, taking off at the right time right now. They're not one-dimensional where they just run. You've got A.J. Brown, you've got Goddard, you've got Devonta Smith, you've got 3 good running backs and the legs of Hurts. They went out and picked up Quinn from the Bears to add more strength to that pass rush. This Eagle team is really good, and it looks like they're going to be there all the way.
Yeah, and they've got a lot of young pieces and several running backs that they involved in the game. We've still got the prop up on the Eagles to go undefeated. Obviously, a double touchdown favorite this week. They play on Monday night next week against the Commanders, where they're going to be a double-digit favorite, most likely in that game. So a lot to like about the Eagles right now. And again, as much as you like stuff about the Eagles, there's a lot to not like about the Houston Texans. So you've got 2 teams that are really moving in opposite directions on Thursday night, and that's why you see that big
Derrick
number.
Henry rushed for 250 yards. They just can't stop the run.
Yeah.
But, the Phillies, again, if you're a Philadelphia sports fan, you have to love right now what your Phillies and Eagles are doing. Next game we're going to look at is Bills-Jets. Bills have 5 straight unders in their last 5 games. The Jets are 4-1 against the number their last 5 games. Kind of a big number, almost 2 touchdowns. Only 55% of the tickets are on the Bills right now.
Well, it's amazing. We saw Bills beat a Packers team by double-digit points. It's the first time the Packers outrushed them. The Packers had more yards than them. The Packers had less turnovers than them, and yet the Bills were still able to beat them by 10 points. This Bills team can just do it on all facets. They're going up against this Jet team that really was rolling, and then we saw Breece Hall get hurt. And then the Patriots team that had just lost on a Monday night to the Bears goes in there and kind of really beats them up, really kind of embarrasses Zach Wilson, has him backpedaling all game, throwing some really bad interceptions. Jets were in the game, moving the football, and he just kind of made some really bad decisions that allowed the Patriots to kind of pull away with that game. And again, bad situation here again with the Bills. If he doesn't make those good choices against this Bills team, we're just going to watch this Bills team do what they continue to do, and that's make those quick strikes and be able to score in all opportunities. And now they get Hakeem Nimes, and we'll see how they utilize him in the offense. But again, just another player that they add to this Bills team that's obviously chasing an AFC championship and our Super Bowl favorites.
I think it's interesting, too, that the Jets elevated Mike White from the practice squad to be the backup quarterback behind Zach Wilson instead of Joe Flacco. So White was really good last year in spurts. He has the big arm. He managed the game well. He got Elijah Moore more involved. So I thought it was kind of interesting that if Zach Wilson struggles here a bit, do you see a quarterback change?
Yeah, and as much as the Patriots really looked like they blew the Jets out in that game, there was a lot of we'll call them questionable calls. I think there was two roughing the passer, pass interference calls. One that Mac Jones is out scrambling, doesn't dive head first, goes head first. Gets essentially tackled and the Jets get a call for roughing the late hit roughing the quarterback that kept the drive alive that the Patriots scored on, and then another one where the Jets actually had a pick six where Mac Jones gets kind of tapped in the back a little bit late in the play, and that gets called back and removes a Jets touchdown there. So some big calls, some big swings in that game that the Jets had a chance to win that game. But this game is going to ride on the shoulders of Zach Wilson and his decision-making. If they turn the ball over against this Bills team, they're going to be in trouble.
He's got good young skill position wideouts and Moore and Davis and Wilson. He just has to be able to get them the ball. Another game we're going to look at now is Dolphins and Bears. Dolphins are all in. Both these two teams were really active at the trade deadline. Dolphins probably made the biggest splash of all, going out and getting Bradley Chubb to help that defensive line to put pressure on the quarterback. I thought the Bears made a great move in trading for Chase Claypool. They made 3 trades. Traded on defense Robert Quinn and Roquan Smith, picked up Chase Claypool to give Justin Fields kind of that young wideout. We saw the Bills do that with Josh Allen and Stephon Diggs. The Eagles do that with Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, and now the Bears doing that with Chase Claypool. I think that there's some good quarterbacks in the draft, but all the big-name guys kind of signed their extensions last year or were dealt. So I think it's a good move for the Bears to do this. But this Dolphins team, if Tua can stay healthy, I think they're all in. They're 5-3. They can run the ball. They've got dynamic wideouts in Hill and Waddle. And now that defense with Chubb, they're going to be really, really good, I think, and a tough team to beat down the stretch. But the key to me is really keeping Tua healthy.
Yeah, and obviously improving that defense is one of the things that they needed to do. They jumped. They were down 21-7 to the Lions last week and were able to fight their way back. Not only win the game, but actually cover the game.
Don't forget, they were down big to the Ravens a few weeks ago, too. So they've had to make some huge comebacks to get to that 5-3 record.
It was one of the worst games on the board for us last week as everyone had the Dolphins, needed the Lions big. Lions jumped out to that big early lead and then just slowly find the way the Dolphins come back and win. Actually, we had recommended Jalen Waddle in our fantasy segment. Jalen Waddle went with a big game. Had 2 touchdowns, and Tyreek Hill was uncoverable. So they've got those 2 guys, and you talk about if Tua's healthy. Now they adding Mostert to the mix. They trade Chase Edmonds for Bradley Chubb. They really didn't want to give Evans up, but to be able to get Chubb and really fix things on the defensive side, they're middle of the pack in sacks. You add Chubb to that defense, this Dolphins team is somebody that can go make a run.
They did add another running back, though, too.
Yeah,
added Jeff Wilson.
Jeff Wilson from the Niners, so they've got some depth there as well. The Bears team, we saw them pull the surprise upset in New England, played an absolutely fantastic game. Continue to see the development of Justin Fields, running the ball a little bit more, but then they went into Dallas and really struggled to stop the run as Ezekiel Elliott wasn't available. Tony Pollard ran up 3 touchdowns on him. Dak Prescott, we talked about getting a little bit more feel for the game and more time, and Dallas put up 49 points on them. So maybe the fact that the Dolphins are playing back-to-back road games, maybe there's some confidence in the Bears to be able to put up an early lead on the Dolphins the same way the Lions did, and then somehow find a way to hold on. But these are 2 teams, Dolphins looking to get in the playoff hunt, looking to stay there, and the Bears team that's really somewhat trying to find their identity and a little bit of rebuilding going on right now with trading both their captains these last 2 weeks and acquiring the big piece in Claypool.
Now we're going to look at an NFC North game between the Packers and the Lions. Really, the Packers were the only team that didn't do anything out of the NFC North. I know they were in on Chase Claypool a little bit. Vikings and Lions had that big trade for T.J. Hawkinson. We touched on the Bears a little bit. Kind of an interesting trend here. The Packers are the favorite, but only 44% of the tickets are on the Packers, and Detroit is 5-0 against the number the last 5 times they've played against Green Bay at home. So Detroit likes to play Green Bay in Pontiac, and I guess the bettors are seeing that as well, as only 44% of the tickets are on the visiting Packers right now.
Well, and we'll see what Detroit does this week after losing a big piece of their puzzle in T.J. Hawkinson, a tight end that's done absolutely fantastic things for them, really led the team last year until he got hurt and has had some big games this year. So they're going to lean on Reynolds and St. Brown. DeAndre Swift still is playing, or came back last week, but still isn't playing healthy, still playing getting banged up. They've been leaning a lot on Jamel Williams. And it comes down to Goff. If he's able to make the throws and not have the turnovers, they can have a good offense. But they are a team that you can pick on from a defensive standpoint. Their defense is not good. Their defensive secondary is not good.
All their home games go over because they get a big lead.
But that's been one thing that's been a problem for Green Bay. They really haven't been able to do it with their receiving core.
Right.
So whether it's the Dobbs or Watson or Cobb, Tanyan has been a big part of the offense. They need to do it and exploit this Detroit secondary, and do they have the players to do it? Now, we know Rodgers finds a way, but they've now lost 4 straight, and this is kind of a must-win situation for the Packers.
Next game we're going to look at is Raiders-Jags. I think you can make a case that, Raiders really kind of laid an egg last week. I mean, now at 2-5, I just don't see...
They literally laid it. They
did.
Put up a donut.
I really don't see them making a playoff run now. I know that there's so much parity in the league and so many teams hovering around 500 or below that you might have a team that wins 8 or 9 games that makes the postseason. I just think in that division with the Chiefs going to 2-5 right now, I just don't think they have enough to be a playoff team. They've lost. They're the only team that is 0-4 on the road. There's 2 teams in the NFC that are 0-3 on the road. Right now, the Raiders are the only 0-4 team on the road. So the last 2 years, they've been kind of road warriors. Not the case so far this year. Excuse me. Interesting trend here. The Jags have had some success against the Raiders, going 6-2 against the number the last 8 times they've played. Very low number, I think similar to last week when they played at the Saints. Back-to-back road games for the Raiders. My guess is we'll still be huge Jag fans when this game kicks off on Sunday.
Yeah, obviously monster disappointing. I sat here coming out of the bye week looking at the Raiders' schedule and thinking they had potentially 6 winnable games in a row. That they could get themselves back in the hunt. They just go down and, the Saints defense that we kind of expected to be much, much better finally, played a good game. The Raiders didn't cross the 50-yard line until middle of the fourth quarter, so they really were just shut down. Devontae Adams has 1 catch for 3 yards. A lot of this starting to question mark is falling on Josh McDaniels and what is he doing with this team and how is he making this team better. They did elect back-to-back games here, in the southeast, I guess. We're playing in New Orleans and now playing in Jacksonville. The team stayed out there. They're actually practicing in Tampa at IMG, and then they'll make the trip over to Jacksonville. So maybe it's a team bonding week where they're all together kind of on the road. They do get a Jaguar team that did play in London last week.
Right.
So I consistently talked about, when teams play in London, they normally came and then had their bye week. So the Jaguars played Denver last week in London, isn't taking a bye week. So again, a unique situation.
Let's just elaborate on that
there.
though. But the league now has given the teams the option to take a bye or not. Denver did. They did not.
Yeah. So again, just an interesting scenario there that they're not. And Travis Etienne, the Jaguars trade James Robinson to the Jets. He didn't see much action this first week, but Travis Etienne has been absolutely fantastic, averaging 6.5 yards a carry. I think he's leading the league with the minimum attempts and with that average. So with the way the Raiders failed to stop the run last week with Kamara, if they're not able to stop Etienne and the Jaguar rushing offense, they're going to have similar struggles this week.
So now let's look at a game that, before the season started, you could have made a case that maybe this was going to be the marquee game of this week, and that's the Rams at the Bucs. Both teams come in under 500. Both teams really struggling right now. They were 2 of the teams that were on the top of the Super Bowl future book list. And some interesting trends, though. The Rams really kind of own Tampa. They're 5-0 against the number the last 5 times in Tampa. They're also 5-0 straight up the last 5 times in Tampa. I think both these teams need a win. I still think that Tampa's going to find a way to win the NFC South. Even if it's below 500, they're still winning the South. You have to worry about the Rams a little bit now because the Seahawks are probably the biggest surprise in all of football, being 5-3. And then I still think the Niners, although 4-4, if you had to ask me right now, Bills are playing who in the Super Bowl? I know a lot of people would say the Eagles. I think I might say the 49ers.
If I had Rams and Bucks, if I could spit out an emoji right now, it would be the throw-up emoji. Because both these 2 teams, it's been awful.
You got to add that, John.
We've talked about the Bucks for several weeks now. We talked about Brady last week against the Ravens and going up against a weak Ravens secondary. And he's just, he still threw for 300-plus yards, but no touchdown passes. And the Bucs just don't look like the Bucs. They're not the team, both on the offensive and defensive side of the football that we expected. Rams coming off the Super Bowl hangover. It's Cooper Kupp. And then there's really nobody else, as we've talked about. Robinson, really not there. Higbee, from a tight end standpoint, dropped a big pass that would have given them a first down. And obviously the 49ers have just absolutely owned the Rams. And now you add Christian McCaffrey to the mix, and he, does something that, hasn't been done with the passing, receiving, and rushing. But going back to Rams-Bucs, it's an ugly game of two teams that are just not playing good football. It's not a game that I'd want to bet, as you have two teams that just aren't performing. It's maybe something to bet an under, as maybe these defenses can show something, because these two offenses have just been absolutely stagnant.
I think it's a much bigger game to the Rams. Excuse me. I think the Bucs will win the South by default. I know the Falcons are playing really well right now. I think it catches up with them at some point. They're a home dog to the Chargers this week. But this Rams team, with the off-field distractions of Akers, as you mentioned, between Van Jefferson and Allen Robinson, they haven't really kind of become that second guy like Beckham did last year. The offense is a little bit more one-dimensional. They've really struggled, and they just don't look like the same Ram team.
Yeah, no, and you talk about where the Niners are sitting, the way the Seahawks are playing with potentially a close, winnable game in Arizona. And I don't think you should discount the Saints in the AFC South. We talk about the Falcons. I think the Saints team kind of failed to find their identity. Talked about some of the struggles of Dennis Allen, the head coach, and what he was doing. But I think that was a big win for them, get the shutout win over the Raiders. I think another big Monday night coming up for them against the Ravens. If they're able to catch a little bit of a roll, and Kamara hadn't played well, and now it's the Alvin Kamara show. If they're able to continue to go into him, they can find a way to win some games, especially their home games.
They really need to get Michael Thomas and Jarvis Landry back. I think getting those two pieces back helps a young wide receiver in Olave, but also helps Kamara out of the backfield. So they've been hurt now for, I think, 4 straight games. They really need to get those pieces back.
Well, and they've got some unique pieces with, and the way Andy Dalton's still playing. Jameis Winston can come in and add a different dynamic. We see Taysom Hill still under center, throwing balls, rushing there. That Saints team is just an odd team to go up against.
So now let's look at the 2 primetime games. Titans-Chiefs. Titans start the season 0-2. Everybody's pretty much writing them off. They've won 5 straight games. They're 5-0 against the number in that stretch. They're getting double digits here against the Chiefs, and the bettors like it. 55% of the tickets are on the Titans here. I think the big caveat here is, though, if Ryan Tannehill can't play, Malik Willis only threw for 55 yards last week. Can he do enough on Sunday night in a hostile environment to keep that offense with Woods and some of their young wideouts kind of in the mix? They're not going to be able to run against Kansas City. And the Chiefs coming off their bye, we know how great that Andy Reid is off a bye.
Yeah, Willis was asked to go left and to go right. To Derrick Henry last week, and Houston, much obliged. And Houston, it wasn't like Houston didn't try to put guys in the box. Derrick Henry ran for yards, even with 10 guys in the box. If the Chiefs employ that same strategy, who knows how they'll actually do against Derrick Henry, but it can't be any worse than what the Texans did last week. And you think that in order to keep pace in this game, it's going to have to be Malik Willis or Tannehill getting some big pass plays to keep up with this Kansas City Chiefs offense, which adds Kadarius Toney. So we don't know how they're going to move him into the mix. They acquired him.
He is practicing, and they said they expect him to play. From
the Giants last week, so they had the whole bye week to work. And obviously Patrick Mahomes, just dynamic. They're at home, and you talked about Andy Reid off the bye week. I don't know what the percentages are, but his against the spread record off the bye week is absolutely fantastic.
Do you think if they announce, and I know he's supposed to practice at least on a limited basis today, Ryan Tannehill, that if he is the starter, do you think this line goes down a little bit?
I still don't think it goes under double digits. We're at the 12. I don't think that it goes south of 10.5. I don't think that's what really the game is based on. This game is based on when we see the Titans play that playoff atmosphere, Tennessee defense, and give the ball to Derrick Henry, they can stay in games. But this Chiefs offense is going to be tough for them to keep up. And if the Chiefs somehow come out to a 10-0, 14-0 lead, Tennessee has to abandon the Derrick Henry plan, and that's where they'll find themselves in trouble.
All right, let's dive into the Monday night game now. I know we touched on both these teams a little bit. It's Ravens-Saints. Ravens opened up a 3-point favor in this game. We've seen it drop a little bit. I think you look at this Raven team, only 47% of the tickets are on the Ravens right now. So many struggles on defense, more double-digit leads that they've given up over the last 6 weeks than any team in football. They go out and add Roquan Smith to that defense. They've activated a couple of defensive players on IR, and last time we saw the Saints play, they pitched a shutout.
This is my game of the week, and I can make arguments on both sides of this. Thursday night, we saw Baltimore play at Tampa Bay, so they've got the extra rest coming in this game. They need to get Mark Andrews healthy. He came into that Tampa Bay game, right? Came into that Tampa Bay game with a bad knee, injured his shoulder in that game. However, Baltimore discovered a new star in Isaiah Likely, the second tight end. So if you're able to add Likely to the mix with a healthy Mark Andrews, that passing offense gets a lot better. Demarcus Robinson played a good game, kind of after Bateman, who's been banged up as well. Bateman's going to miss this game, but they do have the weapons in Duvernay, Robinson, and Andrews and Likely. And obviously, we always know what Lamar Jackson can do on the ground running the football. And on the other side of things, I think the Saints are finally kind of discovering themselves and finding a way to use Andy Dalton. If he doesn't turn the ball over like he did in Arizona in a game that they lost, this is a pretty good offense, especially when you add Alvin Kamara back into the mix. And the big thing for me is this is back-to-back road games for Baltimore and New Orleans on a Monday night. We know that place is going to be rocking. I think it's going to be an incredibly difficult place to play. So the Saints as a dog here, I think this game is going to go down. I think we're going to see this game end up closer to a pick-em just in the way that this thing is going to shake out.
Yeah, it's a great slate. Sorry I'm losing my voice. I'm going to let Jay close out the pro section, but should be a fun week in pro football this week.
Yeah, every week's a fun week in pro football, and same thing in college football. It really is just exciting football. We didn't really have a great week of pro football last week. We got the Saints to beat the Raiders was a good game for us. The Packers covering against the Bills was a good game for us, and then the Browns beating Cincinnati on the Monday night. But outside of that, really the public won the vast majority of games last week. Cowboys were a big winner for them. The Vikings were a big winner. Dolphins were a big winner. Patriots, Seahawks. So you guys had a lot more winners than losers. So again, maybe that public is starting to find the groove on evaluating these teams. Do have 6 teams on a bye week this week, with several teams being off. So there's a little bit shorter games. The one thing that's kind of weird in the schedule is there's only 2 1:00 games this week. So some oddness to the NFL schedule this week. But I'm really looking forward to the NFL slate that as we head into this week.
Sounds great. We'll be back for our last segment, the good and the bad and the ugly. I can hear John kind of queuing up the music right now. I'll try to stop coughing a little bit, and we'll jump back into that last segment, guys.
It's football season, baby. And you know what that means. It's time to bet your buns off. And when it comes to sports betting, you better bet with the STN Sports App. So what in the heck are you waiting for? Download the STN Sports App today and trust the local favorite.
Hey, everybody. We're back with our favorite segment of Bookends, the good, the bad, and the ugly. I know John's kind of got it queued up right now. I can hear that music in the background. And Jay, we're gonna dive in before we get in the good, the bad, the ugly. Is Stephen Money's fantasy football fever? We've given out some really good, I think, information last couple of weeks. I know you gave out Waddle last week. Let's dive right in to the quarterbacks. I'm gonna go Joe Burrow. The Bengals are 7-1 against the number. Their last 8 games. They come off a really poor performance against the Browns on Monday Night Football. They're back home here. They play the Panthers. I'm going with Joe Burrow, with Higgins and Boyd mixing to have a big game on Sunday.
Yeah, obviously he's missing Chase, but again, the Panthers kind of give the ability to throw the ball a little bit on them and look for him to rebound. Right. I'm going to go to Kirk Cousins. They're playing at the Commanders. Cousins, this is maybe a little bit of a revenge as he played in Washington from 2012 to 2017. Right. They add a monster piece to the puzzle. Irv Smith goes down. They add T.J. Hawkinson. Not sure how much he's going to be in the game
your division, though?
In the game plan, but man, adding him to the Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen, I just think this is possible for him to put up some big numbers. In Washington, despite the fact that they've played okay, big win at the Bears, they do have some holes in that secondary, and actually the holes got a little bit bigger. William Jackson was one of their cornerstones at the cornerback position. They just traded him to the Steelers this week with the trade deadline. Right. So potentially some holes there in Washington that I think Cousins could go exploit. But I do kind of like watching the game. I think that could be a high-scoring game as I think Heineke's kind of finding
He seems to be a
McLaren.
little bit more dynamic in that offense.
And I'm just waiting
than
for the
Carson
Vikings
Wentz
to not run away with this division and maybe let the Packers sneak back in, as we've seen them kind of continue to win games, and are they just going to be able to pull away with it? So maybe Washington pulls the upset here, but I still think Cousins has a big game.
All right, running back now. I'm going to go with the entire Philadelphia Eagles rushing offense. Is the Texans can't stop anybody. I'm pretty sure you and I could put up 100 against them. If it's Boston Scott, if it's Miles Sanders, Kenneth Gainwell, and of course Jalen Hurts, who's so good at running the ball, I think this offense could have a huge game. You worry about Hurts a little bit if you have him as your fantasy quarterback. Will they do enough through the air? Because you can just dominate and wear this Texan defense down. They can't stop anybody.
Yeah, I think I had Miles Sanders last week, as they were 10-point favorite over the Steelers. Now you take the Eagles running backs again this week as a 14-point favorite, and we could probably take the Eagles running backs again next week as they're going to be a 10-point favorite over the Commanders. They're just going to continue to run the football, get these early leads, and a lot of rushing going on there. So that's a great pick with the Eagles. I'm going to go to a team that is really back up against the wall, and I thought that they played really good Sunday night at Buffalo, and that's the Packers. I really think this is their entire season on the line here, playing at Detroit. So I'm going to go to Aaron Jones. He had a good night. I think he had 20 rushes for 143 yards at Buffalo. So and he loves playing the Lions. He was actually hurt in the game at Detroit last year. At home last year against the Lions, he had 17 rushes for 67 yards and a touchdown, and he had 6 catches for 48 yards and 3 touchdowns. So you heard me right. Aaron Jones, 4 touchdowns last year against the Lions. I think he has maybe not a duplicate performance, but I think that they're going to be looking for Aaron Jones to be a big part of this offense against the Detroit defense that just has holes all over the field.
Dave. I think they fired their defensive coordinator, their defensive backs coach over the past week. So kind of a coaching staff that's in a little bit of disarray. Wide receiver, I'm going to go D-Hop. He's been back for 2 weeks. He's got 22 receptions, 262 yards, and a touchdown. I think now that he's getting more familiar with everything, he's been back for a few weeks. They're back home. Kyler Murray against the Seattle team. I think D-Hop goes off once again at home on Sunday.
Yeah, this is the second time these divisional opponents will be matching up. It was a 19-9 game in Seattle. Now we go down to Arizona, and strangely enough, when you see a team play like 19-9 in a low-scoring game,
this will be 39 to 29.
A lot of times the next matchup, they figure something out when they see the film, and then they go play an over game. So potentially look for all the players, both Seattle and Arizona, to put up some big numbers. For my wide receiver, I'm not going to give you a name. I'm just going to give you a team, and we've got to wait till a little bit later in the week to figure out who we actually are going to play. And that's the Los Angeles Chargers. They go up against the Falcons, who have the worst statistical secondary in the league, giving up touchdowns and yardage. However, Mike Williams, we know, is out for this game for the Chargers. Keenan Allen still isn't practicing. Josh Palmer just cleared concussion protocol. And then the other guy is DeAndre Carter. We also could talk and throw in Gerald Everett, their tight end, of the mix. But once you figure out who's playing for the Chargers, I think that's a look ahead to say, hey, I like Carter, or I like Palmer, especially if Keenan Allen's out here. One of those two guys is a guy that's probably available even on a waiver wire. That could be a sneaky pick and a pickup against Atlanta.
Justin Herbert's really struggled, though, without Allen and without Mike Williams. So you have to hope you get maybe Allen back in this game. So that's our Stephen Money's Fantasy Football Fever. We're going to jump right in now to the good, the bad, and the ugly, our favorite segment. And let's see what we have here, Jay. So what do you have as your good right now?
I got to lead off with Bryce Harper, the hometown kid, and what he's led this Philadelphia Phillies to. We watch him have the big homer last night. He's now homered. Actually, he's the first player in Major League history to homer in the wild card divisional championship series and now the World Series. Now, I say Major League history because the wild card game has actually only gone back 10 years. So it's kind of a cheating little stat that makes it seem more historic. But he's been on an incredible run, and watching that home run last night, just a first pitch homer, it's just been absolutely incredible. And we'll see if the Phillies can continue to roll. But hats off to Harper and the Phillies. It's been incredible to watch and a lot of fun to watch.
I'm going to go with the good, and I'm going to stay at home, and it's VGK. I think this is their best start in their history, even better than their inaugural season. You're getting Eichel more and more into the mix. You're getting great goaltending from these young guys. They're tied with the Bruins for the most points in the NHL. They've gotten off to a phenomenal start. The Pacific is wide open, and I think this is what we had hoped for this Knights team. If you can stay a little bit healthy and get some of these young goaltenders to really play well, that you could turn the table. I think this Knights team is really good.
Yeah, I was Boston was almost my good. The Bruins have been absolutely fantastic, a team that was expected to be banged up at the beginning of the year. Ulberg, their goaltender, has been absolutely incredible. They get Marchand back. They've been doing it 9-1, down 3 goals to the Penguins last night. They come back and find a way to win in overtime. So the Boston Bruins was a team that was expected to be middle of the pack, Eastern Conference, now sitting at the top. So they were potential to be good as well, but I couldn't leapfrog them over what Bryce Harper is doing.
All right, how about the bad?
I was really close to making this my ugly, but I'm going to come in with the Cal Bears college football as my bad. And the reason behind it is just a little bit of frustration in watching the Cal Bears. They opened the season with a win against UC Davis. They beat UNLV. They go play a tough game at Notre Dame where they only lose by 7 when Notre Dame was really struggling. Then they come back with a win over Arizona. But the last 4 weeks, they've lost 4 straight. They lost at Washington State. They lost at Colorado, who you can make an argument is one of the worst teams in college football. They then lose a home game to Washington, and then they lose at home to Oregon this past week, 42-24. Right. And it's not so much that they lost to Oregon this week, 42-24, but it's the way that they quit. And I think if you go back to week 1 of college football, my ugly was Georgia Tech.
Right.
Because I felt like they quit in a home game against Clemson at the end of the game. They didn't try. They just ran the ball on the line. And then we see the Georgia Tech coach get fired just 2 weeks later. And Justin Wilcox for Cal, they've been a 500 team in his entire time there. But they're down 42-24. They brought in their backup quarterback after their quarterback gets hurt. They score a touchdown. There's 3 minutes to go in the game. You're down 18. Coincidentally, they're a 17-point underdog. But you're down 18 in the game, right. 3 minutes to go. You've got all 3 of your timeouts. He does an onside kick. He just kicks it off. Oregon gets the ball, and they're just running into the line, and he doesn't call his timeouts. He essentially tells his kids,
"Game's over.
We're not interested in playing till the end of the game."
Right.
Which, just from watching a game standpoint, watching the game from a standpoint of anybody that had Cal to hopefully be maybe betting for a backdoor cover or for them to do something, the
right.
coach quit on the kids, and I just don't know how, from a fan standpoint, you can put your money on Cal when you just watch them quit. He wanted nothing to do with continuing to play in the game. Now they go to USC this week. They've got games, I think, left at Oregon State. If this is how Justin Wilcox is going to coach, where we don't play till the end of the game, I mean, you only play 12 college football games
right.
a year. When you're a Pac-12 head coach and you have a job that's essentially a 365-day-a-year job to be a Pac-12 head coach, to go play 12 games, and you teach your team that we don't finish games, we don't play at the end of the games, that's how you get yourself targeted to get fired, the same way somebody from Georgia Tech got fired. And it eats at my inner core when I see a coach do that, because it's just shame on you. Don't teach your kids to quit. Play till the end of the game. Use it as a leapfrog of, hey, let's do an onside kick. Let's act like we're
right.
down 7, so that in the next game when you're down, the kids have been in that scenario to go after finishing games.
I was going to ask you how you really feel about
yeah,
Cal,
soapbox,
but I'm fairly confident that you answered that question. My bad, I'm going to stay at home. I'm going to go with the Raiders. I know we touched on them a little bit, but 2-5 right now, last place in the AFC West. I think making those trades for Chandler Jones and Devontae Adams coming into the season, that expectations were sky high. They've lost a couple of games they should have won this year. Shouldn't have lost that game to the Cardinals. Could have beat the Titans. But to go after you beat the Texans, the second game out of your bye, you go to the Saints, and you just don't score. I mean, you just looked. I mean, how does Devontae Adams have 1 catch for 3 yards? I know Darren Waller didn't play. The whole team just seemed out of sync a little bit. They weren't prepared to play in this game. They've got a huge uphill battle. I know that everyone is saying, oh, yeah, McDaniels, his job is safe right now. But I have to say, to me, they're one of the biggest disappointments in all of football through the first 8 weeks of the season.
Yeah, over-under wins at 8.5. Expected to battle for the division and really have kind of laid an egg. really close to making these dual uglies and then adding some additional uglies to the mix.
All right, what's your ugly?
As frustrated I am with Cal, as bad, and I really think they're ugly. The ugly for me is the Brooklyn Nets. We just fired Steve Nash. It's been an absolute mess the last season there with the bringing in of Ben Simmons and trading Harden. Durant's been a mess. Kyrie Irving with his disrespectful, disgusting remarks this past week. Steve Nash is the winningest coach to ever be fired, winning at a 58% winning percentage, 94-67, essentially walking away from a team that was favored in the East. The Nets are a mess right now, and they're talking about picking up potentially the Boston coach who was just fired and suspended by Boston, adding them to their head coach mix. And so from an ugly standpoint, everything that we're looking at from a Brooklyn Nets standpoint is a mess for me. So they're my ugly.
And this was kind of the hand-picked group. Remember 2 years ago, they kind of decided that they were going to build their big three. They all were going to go to Brooklyn and play, see how that turned out for them. My ugly is, I know we've touched on it a little bit, I'm staying in pro football, is some of the top teams from last year in the NFC, the Bucks, the Packers, and the Rams. What the heck is going on? All three teams are below 500, really struggling, and curious to see how many of those teams don't make the playoffs this year. I still think the Bucks are going to find a way to win the South, but the way the Vikings are playing right now, the best the Packers can hope for is a wild card. The Rams have already lost twice to the 49ers. They trail the Seahawks and the 49ers right now. I just think the NFC is kind of upside down a little bit with some of the top teams who we all expected to be there this year.
Well, I think that we're seeing a changing of the guard in the NFL, and we've had the gift of watching some incredible quarterback play for the last decade with Brady and Rodgers and Stafford, and I'm going to throw Roethlisberger into the mix, Matt Ryan, all of these guys that we've really enjoyed.
Russell Wilson.
We've enjoyed watching them play at a really, really high level, and maybe they've all just kind of stuck around for just a hair too long, and whether it's the injuries at the quarterback position or just the speed of the game and not having the rushing aspect that these guys don't have as a part of their game anymore with the defensive blitz packages and the size and speed of these players. It really feels like these teams are struggling. Specifically, you mentioned Ram, Packer, Buck, in that they're
Bronco,
just not getting the quarterback play from these older quarterbacks that we're used to seeing.
I think a lot of it, Jay, is that it's such a quarterback-driven league, yet you've seen so many of these young quarterbacks come in. If it's a Zach Wilson, a Trevor Lawrence, a Justin Fields right now, Mac Jones, they're just Trey Lance. These guys, it takes more than a year for them to make that transition to an NFL quarterback. And even though a lot of these guys have had a lot of games where they've started, they are still struggling. So when you have a veteran quarterback that's had success, that's won a Super Bowl, and all the guys that we mentioned, each one of them has won a Super Bowl, is the option behind them better or not? But these young guys, it just seems like you draft a quarterback to be your face of the franchise, to be your quarterback of the future, yet they're thrust into a starting role very early on in their career, and I think it takes a little bit of time. I think the expectation level just might be too great for these guys to contribute week one. There's not a lot of Peyton Mannings and Andrew Lucks and John Elways that come out anymore.
Well, and when you look at the dynamic of today's top quarterbacks, the guys that are leading their teams at the top of the divisions, Mahomes runs the football, Josh Allen runs the football, Jalen Hurts runs the football. I mean, it's a different position. It's a laundry list of guys that can actually take off and run. Dak Prescott is a threat to run the football. I mean, Lamar Jackson, threat to run football. Joe Burrow, a threat to run football. I think you have to add that piece to your game, and if you don't have it, it's just going to be tougher and tougher to win at the quarterback position.
Before we leave you guys, just a reminder, still get signed up for STN Sports right now, up to a $100 bonus going on. It's a great time to get signed up. I mean, you've got basketball, football, hockey, so many things going on right now. Get signed up, World Series, have some fun with it. We always love giving you guys all this info and having some fun. This is a huge, busy sports weekend, World Series, Breeders' Cup, and the other sports that we touched on. So good luck this week, and we hope to see you here at Red Rock and all of our racing sports books throughout the Valley. And we'll see you guys next week on the Sports Betting Podcast, Bookends.